Welcome back. Once again, we're more than halfway through the legislative session. Can you believe the time that we've spent together? Anyway, really some bad bills. Take a look at HB 11. It really gets me angry. And did we repost the... Okay, so if you'll go to the Senate page, don't go now because you're watching the live, but right underneath us is a phenomenal video put together by some of our amazing volunteers about HB 11. So be sure and go take a look at that. So many bad bills, so little time. I want to remind you, tomorrow, Representative Dan McKay, who will be here. He is my good friend that you see on both sides of the aisle on KCPW. And the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Utah, if we can find enough powder, will be here next week on Tuesday, and I think you're going to love Lieutenant Governor Cox. So he's here. Today we've got a couple of guests. Madalena McNeil will be here later, but right now I am very pleased to have Moroni Benally, who is a real live Native American activist. He has taught college. He's this close to his PhD. He's been an official with the Navajo Nation. He lives in Utah now. 50,000 Native Americans within the state of Utah. Never has there been a Native American who has sat in the legislature, in the House or the Senate. Never an elected statewide official. How is that humanly possible?
That's one of the things we've been, when I'm working with the tribes, that's one of the things we keep talking about. And something just uniquely different about the state of Utah. It may be the Mormon Pass, it may be that there are disproportionately more white people in positions of power in the state of Utah than there are in other places. Like in Arizona, there's 18 tribes in the state of Arizona. There's 22 tribes in the state of New Mexico. So tribal issues are constantly in front of the legislature and decision makers. And so,
how many tribes do we have in Utah?
There are five. Five tribes.
I have seen through the Bears Ears process some amazing leadership, some spiritual strength that would bring a normal person to emotion. I've seen leadership. I've seen quiet coordination. Why can't we get that kind of leadership here?
I just moved to Utah in September, but I've been working with the state of Utah for a couple of years, and working now with these communities of color, we're asking the same question. And what seems to be the case with both the Republican and some in the Democratic Party is they'll position white people for public office and just automatically assume that people of color will fall in line. And it's incredibly difficult for a person of color to kind of rise up the ranks unless they start acting, in a word, white. Are there Native Americans and other legislators in Arizona? Oh yeah,
absolutely. New Mexico.
I think there are 7 legislators in the House and the Senate in the state of New Mexico or Arizona.
What is wrong with us?
Yeah, and there's about 5 or 6 in New Mexico as well in the state and House. And they're on city councils, they're on town councils, they're on county councils.
So my first real exposure to Native Americans and the politics of Native Americans came during Bears Ears.
Right.
And I had no idea of the divisions within Native American peoples and different tribes. This tribe doesn't like that tribe historically, and they don't talk to them, and and I'm not trying to demean anybody. I think people need to know that there are these historic enmities between some of the tribes. And while we don't want to spend a lot of time on that, can you give us a headline of that? And one of the reasons I want to bring it up is it shows something astonishing when the kind of unanimity within all the Native groups comes together like in Bears Ears.
Yeah, historically, the Ute, and I was just talking with the Ute tribe the other day, and historically, Navajo and Ute have always been enemies. Hopi and Navajo have historically been enemies, but there was something about the Bears Ears in terms of the spirituality, but also about an exercise of sovereignty that just kind of transcended all of these historical disagreements and these frictions that existed. And it was that idea of what sovereignty can become and what it can do for tribes that is actually embedded in the whole Bears Ears. And so for them, it's about spirituality, but it's also about laying a foundation for the future for their people, and self-determination, self-governance, and actually claiming ownership of their future.
12,000 years ago, everywhere you see in what is now the state of Utah was inhabited by Native Americans. That clearly there were no Europeans, there wasn't anybody else here.
Right.
Then along marches what? The very first people here are, the very first non-natives are what? The Spaniards come marching in?
Right.
Then they decide Utah's ours, they give it to the King of Spain. Am I going too far back? I probably am. But my point in all of this is going to be a long history which says this is really all Native American land, and we all just kind of go in and grab our share.
Right.
So the Bears Ears, was it in some sense getting back to what is really the native land?
I think that was part of the drive, and just reclaiming really the spirituality associated with the land, and reclaiming that connection they had with the land. And I think, and it being in the context of a political and legal struggle made it even more important.
How is the kind of poverty that I've seen in San Juan County and in parts of Utah, that I think if normal Utahns, not normal, but Utahns that have never been there, if they saw, they would be shocked. It's like the third world.
Right.
How is that even possible that this is the state of Utah and the water truck comes once a week, or there is no indoor plumbing, or there is such abject, horrendous poverty? What has gone so wrong?
Well, one is we don't actually own the land, and so there's a lot of issues in terms of just trying to build infrastructure. So most infrastructure projects that will tend to lead to economic development, that will do all sorts of great things, has to go through sometimes the state, if they're a 280 tribe like the Shoshone are by Brigham City, or they have to go through a series of federal agencies in order to get permission to do something on the land.
Like what? Like to
build a house.
Build a big factory?
To build a house.
To build a house, you got to go to Washington?
Yes.
Or to Salt Lake?
The Department of Interior approval to build a house.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not.
And that's not just kind of blah, blah, blah. That really means that's what happens. And you go fill out a form, and the BIA in Washington has to look at it and stamp it and all.
Right. And some tribes have modified the process and put it in-house in the tribes, but they still have to have contact with the Department of Interior in order to actually gain legal approval to build a house. So if I want to build a house there, I have to go through this entire process, and it could take anywhere from 6 months to 7 years to get approval.
6 months on a good shot.
Yes, 7 years. About 5 years, 3 to 5 years is about average.
So what is this incredible patience among the Native people? And I hate to say what a lot of Caucasians would be doing. I mean, I see what the non-patient people of that neck of the woods, they're so impatient with everything. If this kind of federal control was over them, they would really be out of control.
Well, we figure that this is our land. This is where we emerged from, and we're not going anywhere. As most Native people will say, the holy people or the Creator put us there, and He intended us to stay there, and so we'll just kind of wait things out. And so that's kind of how.
All right. What about a deal? What about a deal like this? You and I are negotiating. All right, outdoor retailers, you want to stay here? We'll say we're so sorry for this stupid resolutions we passed.
Right.
But in exchange, we want you, Patagonia, or you, REI, or you, whatever, to build a factory, a production facility, something inside the reservations, inside where Native people, we got to have these jobs. It's the key to everything.
Right. I would say absolutely. That's a project worth pursuing. And if there's any way that the Navajo Nation can offer, or other tribes can offer incentives to do that in conjunction with the Bears Ears, absolutely.
Now, how did you explain what happened with Bears Ears? How do you explain? I mean, I had an idea. I had a
Right.
Greater Canadian Lands. I had the bill. I was ready to go. So I didn't even know about Bears Ears, and I met with some Native people, and they said, not so fast, fat white guy from the avenues in Salt Lake. That may be your plan, but that's not where we're going. And I threw in the cards like that and said, whatever you're right.
Right.
This is your land today. This has been your land. We'll go where you want you to go. But the rollout, the professionalism, the unity, the step-by-step was it's one of the great campaigns in history.
Right. So my cynical sense, which was proven with empirical data the other day when I was working with some folks, is we looked at the GIS mapping of all the tribal lands, and especially those associated with the PLI and the Bears Ears.
PLI is Bishop's
Public
Plan.
Lands Initiative. And so those GIS maps revealed a great deal of natural resources under those lands. And in my opinion, the Bears Ears was really a struggle to ensure continued exploitation of natural resources, exploration, and I believe it's all done under the pretext of federalism and this argument of states' rights, which I don't really think is a real argument.
You're saying that Bishop and Representative Ivory and Representative Noel and the governor, I mean, why would I do individual names? Virtually the whole legislature, this had to do with one thing and one thing only.
Right, because if they were really concerned about this notion of federalism and states' rights, they would have been paying attention to Federalist Paper number 42, which clearly outlines the role of the tribal sovereign. And it as the third sovereign in the federal system. But yet they fail to continue to even talk about Federalist Paper number 42 and its role in federal-state relations. And so, in my opinion, if they were really serious about it being a state issue, states' rights, they would have brought that up.
Somebody grab Federalist Paper 42 and let's continue down that road. All right, you ready to take some comments, questions,
Sure.
opinions?
Sure.
Mike Shinaki, did you speak to the Escalante Chamber going to D.C. to lobby against the shrinking of
I did not.
the Grand Escalante?
Yeah, I did not.
That's a breakthrough moment.
Yeah.
The Escalante Chamber of Commerce going to speak against the governor and this always unified delegation and saying, hell no, leave the Grand Escalante alone. Don't shrink it, don't do anything. I really think that's the watershed moment.
Right. Because in the end, again, for me, it's not about these tensions and struggles between the federal and state powers. It's about the future economic potential that these people see in the natural resources underneath those lands. The subsurface estate, as they call it.
Subsurface estate.
Yeah.
All right, Fred Grundall says, as the First People become more unified and politically active, they're going to get better representation, perhaps even justice.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
So how do we do that? How do you get a force of 50,000 people would be on the order of what? South Salt Lake?
Right.
Sandy-ish?
Right. So one of the projects, just to start off, one of the projects I'm working on with a couple of the tribes here is we're working on getting the funding needed to build a Native American voter database in the state of Utah so we can effectively use that as a voting block. And I think that's the first step. And so that's one of the projects I'm working on right now.
They do shenanigans of voting in San Juan County, right?
Oh, yeah.
The feds are in there looking right now.
Absolutely. There was a paper just published today in the Journal of Politics that described empirically how voter identification, strict voter ID laws actually suppress minority and ethnic voters.
Okay, San Juan County, the majority of people there are Native American.
Right. And the mail-in ballot for the first time caused a lot of trouble in those areas.
Why?
Well, one, because you have a lot of elderly who aren't used to things like that cannot read. Navajo elders who do not speak English, nor can they read. And so they need a translator, and oftentimes they can't get one, nor do they have a ride to get to the post office to deposit their ballot.
See, that seems, to a city guy, that just seems weird, like an excuse, and they can't find it to a post office. What is life like in San Juan County?
Right, so if I were living in, let's say, in one of the chapters of the Navajo Nation, Navajo Mountain, for example, the closest post office would be in Page, Arizona, or actually it would be Page because there's only one way in, one way out. And that's about 60 miles away on unpaved dirt roads that are not maintained. And so you have an elderly woman who may be alone. How is she supposed to do that?
How could she vote? How was she voting before?
She used to go to the local chapter house, and where the senior citizen center would bring their van and take her there, and she'd go in a poll. That was all. They would have a translator there to translate it for her, and she would vote, and she would leave.
What were the feds looking into as far as voting or registering irregularities in San Juan County?
I think it had to do with some of the ID laws and mostly just access to voting polls. And that's the same issue that was brought up by the Ute Nation the other day.
Because white people clearly have less transportation issues. I mean, they got their transportation and they go in, and so by making it remote or by making it more difficult, you are disenfranchising people.
Oh, absolutely.
And it doesn't happen by accident.
No.
All right, let's see. Bobby Roberts says we owe it to the first people to preserve the land for their posterity and ours. I suppose you agree with that. Where are the majority of Native American voters in Utah located? And if they were better represented, could they influence a congressional district?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So there's a number of them. I think the largest concentration actually would be along the Wasatch Front. I think the last census, according to the census blocks, put about 16 or so, maybe 16, 17, I can't quite remember the number, 16 or 17,000 Native Americans from about 200 tribes just living along the Wasatch Front alone.
So your job, one of the things you're doing with this director of the Utah League of Native American Voters is you're identifying Native American voters, getting them involved in the process, and at least now just getting them to vote, not necessarily candidates. Yeah.
Right. Because if we can just get them to vote, we can get, it sends a signal that our base is serious about being represented.
Because, in America, that great table of power, nobody stands up and says, here, take a seat at the table of power. You got to go, you got to kick, you got to fight, you got to organize, you got to vote, you got to donate, you got to run. It's just the way it is, and I love what you're doing with this.
Right. There are a couple native people who are native right now that are thinking of running. I know that my colleague with the Utah League, his name is James Singer, who's half Navajo. He is contemplating a run for public office in the state of Utah. My friend Carol Surveyor is also contemplating a run for office in the state of Utah.
What about Mr. Maryboy? He always talks about running. He's really popular. What do we have to do to get him to run?
Lay out an entire strategy for him, probably. I don't know.
We're going to work on that. I hope you're listening. There's also a fabulous young physician down in the southern part of the state.
Garen.
Garen would be a terrific candidate.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, I remember meeting Garen. So he graduated from the U medical school just recently. No, he did his residency there, and I think he went to medical school as well. So we're sitting around, and this doctor was going here to dermatology to make $400,000 to start, and this one was going here and there. And Garen says, "Yeah, I'm going down to Richfield to work among my people."
Right.
I mean, that kind of love and compassion and activism right there is what we need a lot more in this building. We're in the Senate, by the way.
Right. Well, I mean, that's characteristic of a lot of younger people my age, around my age and younger, that grew up on the reservation without all these amenities. So I grew up in a house that didn't have running water or electricity. So we had to go to haul water twice a week just so we could do basic things. And so we go away to school, and we all want to come back home to help. And so we come back in these large numbers, and with an unemployment rate of around 72%, we don't find the jobs that we need. And so we end up leaving, and we end up in urban areas, other places where we then try to figure out a way to help our people remotely.
The first step Governor Dabakis would take, not likely to happen, but you never know. Look, Donald Trump got elected president. Okay, I'm just saying. I would declare a Marshall Plan. I would say to rural Utah, you know what? Whatever they have been whistling along to you all of these years about the future is in coal, the future is in pulling things out of the ground, you know what? It's not true. And instead of spending $260 million on Facebook along the Wasatch Front, where, hey, we're doing just fine, let's go to some rural places in this state and let's say to Patagonia, you want economic development, you've not seen economic development. First thing we're going to do is make sure the phone service works everywhere. We're going to make sure the infrastructure is there, and we're going to change your life.
Right. And I mean, speaking of phone service, that's one of the other projects I'm working on right now with the Navajo Nation, is actually just to build an Amber Alert system in reservations. They don't exist. They're underfunded, the infrastructure is not there. When children are taken and abducted, it often leads to that horrible end that we never want to think about. And in part because we don't have these things, like this basic telecommunication infrastructure.
Moroni, that's a good Indian name, right?
Yes. As far as I know.
Okay. You haven't done any genealogy on the name?
No, I haven't yet. I thought about doing a DNA thing and send it to that family thing to figure out my DNA.
Moroni Benally, thank you so much for
Absolutely.
being an activist. We got another guest today coming up, so you stay right there. So it's very awkward now because we got nothing. You know, it's not like we can go to a commercial or like a curtain drops down or we distract you with dancers. It's
Okay.
just you.
Well,
go,
I'll just slowly
and,
sneak away.
Yeah, sneak away quietly so no one will notice. And while you're there, we'll have, don't be shy. Come on in. Madalena McNeil, who organized the. What do you have against poor Betsy DeVos? I mean, she's not all that bad.
Well, it's not as much what I have against Betsy DeVos, but again, the rest of Utah, a lot of people in Utah have something against Betsy DeVos.
I finally clicked on me why she was appointed. Governor Herbert's going to Washington. I swear this is true. Look in the Deseret News last night or yesterday. He's going to Washington to do two things: reverse Bears Ears and to end the Department of Education. So now it makes perfect sense.
It does.
Who better to have run a department that you want to implode? I mean, maybe she could have got Sarah Palin to come in and be the deputy. I mean, it finally makes sense why Trump would pick somebody like her.
Yeah. Just when we thought it couldn't get any worse, then it got worse.
Got
It
worse.
made a lot of sense. Yeah, no kidding.
So you have an ambitious, cool project you're working on
Yeah.
right now. What is it?
So what we're working on right now is called the Town Hall for All, and it kind of came out of the Betsy DeVos rally. It came out of the Jason Chaffetz Town Hall. We've asked all of the congressional delegation to host a town hall during February recess.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. So we're going to have our own. We're having a Town Hall for All on Friday, February 24th at 7 p.m. at Cottonwood High School.
Great.
So, yeah.
And so in a peculiar world, you would have Hatch, Lee, Chaffetz, what's his name? The guy nobody's ever heard of. He represents Salt Lake. He's just like an unknown.
Stewart.
Oh, yeah, Stewart.
Yeah.
That's it. Stewart and then Mia Love. You would have, and Jason. You'd have them all show
Yeah.
up on the stage.
Ideally.
But you've invited them all.
Yep.
And so far,
Nothing.
did you get a response? No, I can't make it.
Well, we already know that Chris Stewart's going to be out of the country, but we just know that. No response yet from anyone. So, yeah, Senator Hatch actually got a petition on Friday the 3rd with about 2,000 signatures asking him to host a town hall.
Well, he will. That means they have these phony town halls.
Yeah.
I have a telephone town hall, and it's produced in India, and they screen all the colors. So the only people that come are delegates to the Republican
Yeah.
Party that have been on a 3-minute screen to make sure that they don't interfere with the senator's peace and tranquility. I mean, this is the most phony job of town hall meetings I have ever seen, except for Chaffetz.
Yeah.
He has such a big ego. He decided, I can handle this, and look what happened.
Yeah, that wasn't great for him, but I think it was important for him to
And it
know
was
how
important for
angry people
America.
are. Mhm.
So, have you been paid yet or not? No.
No, I don't get paid. Not for any of this.
And what part of America are you from?
I am from Virginia,
So
actually.
you
that's
were
what they have
shipped
against
here.
me.
You were shipped here specifically to get this
Well,
rally going, right?
Well, in a way.
When
I
did they
guess.
ship you here?
When did they? Oh, I can't tell you that. I can't tell you that. You have to ask Jason Chaffetz for that one.
How long have you lived
In Utah?
In Utah.
About 2 years.
Okay, so this is a lot of pre-thinking.
Yeah.
Because they sent you here 2 years so you would look like you were a real local.
Yeah, we got it all planned out.
Okay, so if people want to get involved with this, they can go to where?
So you can go to, we have a Facebook event for it. It's called Utah Town Hall for All. We have about 10 co-sponsoring organizations right now. One of them is my organization, Utah Speak Out. So if you want to get involved, it's all really being done on Facebook. And yeah, we're inviting people to speak. We're inviting constituents to speak because we're assuming that none of the congressional delegation is going to make it.
You know, I can speak for all of them.
Yeah.
You know, I'll be happy to. Women, we've heard enough of you. Sit down. I mean, I could actually, I kind of go through their process, so I would know.
Well, people have been asking for you to come if you want to be there.
I'll be happy to be there if there's any, if I'm not.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be there.
All right.
All right. So let's say people can find you best on Facebook. One more time.
Facebook. So the event is called Town Hall for All.
Town Hall for All.
Town Hall for All. There we go. We made it catchy, so it could be a hashtag.
It's catchy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time.
See you later. And you, remember, we'll be back tomorrow with the indomitable Dan McKay, who is my part of our threesome that does the program both sides of the aisle, which ought to be three sides of the aisle, but Natalie Gochner's in the middle, so we decided the aisle twice. He'll be here tomorrow. The Lieutenant Governor will be here next Tuesday. Thanks for joining us. Have a wild day.
Thank you.